Tribe, Book 2, Todd Mills Mystery. Author, R.D. Zimmerman. Publisher, Scrib Pub, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Narrator, Eric Aust. Chapter 21. "I can't believe it," said Rollins once Todd had finished telling him the brunt of the story. "You can't. What about me?" Todd hung tightly onto the steering wheel as he drove south on the whitened Xerxes Avenue. "It's just too weird finding out in a matter of a few seconds not only that I might have a son, in his 20s no less, but a granddaughter too. It's a strange world." "No shit." A huge gust of wind and snow belted the car, which caused the entire vehicle to heave to the side. Todd steered back to the right, and he had no idea whether he should be elated or heartbroken. Then again, if Janice didn't even know, how could he? He heard some chuckling to the side, glanced over, saw Rollins leaning against the car door, a gloved hand to his mouth. Todd demanded, "What the hell are you laughing about?" "I don't know if I would have started dating you if I'd known you were grandfather." "Very funny." "Gramps. That's what I'm going to start calling you." "Why do I suddenly feel very old?" "Responsibility does that to a person." Not quite 5 minutes later, Todd turned off Xerxes Avenue and proceeded to the rear of Adena Hospital, where he parked in a 3-story ramp. Both of them pulled up their collars and then ran through the snow and went to the hospital entrance. Once inside, the electronic doors closed behind them, sealing out the storm, and the two of them brushed themselves off, stomped their feet, and glanced about. Not a soul was to be seen. Even the guard's desk was vacant, a desk lamp on, but no one sitting there. "God, this place is like a morgue," said Todd, checking out the halls and empty waiting areas. "Now what?" Rollins shrugged. "As my Russian grandmother used to say, your tongue will lead you to Moscow." "Meaning?" "We start asking questions, and supposedly we'll find out how to get there." "Well, I highly doubt the personnel department is going to be open at this time of night." "No, but there's a receptionist right over there. Where's the picture of the young hunk?" "Don't talk about him like that," said Todd. He reached inside his coat, pulled the photograph from his shirt pocket, and stood there staring at it. Okay, so the kid was good-looking, supposedly bright and pleasant too, but then as Todd studied the high school picture of the kid that might or might not be his son, he had a terrible realization. Had he known for sure at the time that Janice was pregnant with his kid, he wouldn't have encouraged her to do as she did, to put Zeb up for adoption. Rather, he would have encouraged her, been very persistent, and somehow, he was sure, persuaded her to have an abortion. Suddenly, the photograph was yanked out of his hands. "Hey, Todd, come on," called Rollins, pulling Todd back to the moment. "Let's see if anyone recognizes the kid." It was warm back here in the hospital laundry room, and it was safe, settled deep in bags of sheets as if they were nothing more than a hill of beanbags. Zeb cradled his baby in his arms and started to doze off. Ripka had the medication she needed. She'd just eaten a full bottle of formula. She even had a clean diaper, which was much more than he'd ever hoped for tonight. And of course, they had a warm place to sleep. All thanks to Brenda, the nurse, who'd fortunately understood his dilemma, or at least as much as he'd been able to explain. Then again, how could you describe the congregation and have it make sense to anyone who hadn't been there, living on the compound, working in the bakery? Fuck, he thought to himself, with a grin, for it felt so incredibly great just to think it, let alone say it. Whispering so as not to wake the baby, he said, "Fuck." Those morons at the congregation would only say ghastly or worldly. Worldly? What the hell did that mean? How stupid. He was so sick of their Bible babble, so sick of them creeping into every part of his life, demanding that he think one way or their way, and always looking at him suspiciously, because after all, he was a fringer, someone who wasn't really one of them. He felt old, not only because here he was his own baby, asleep in his arms, but because everything was beginning to make sense. He finally understood why his mother had left the congregation over 10 years ago. after her closest friend in the group, Louise, had died of skin cancer. Zeb's own mother had lost her faith completely. It had been treatable. Zeb's mom had explained that night as she stuffed him in one of the cars and drove to the Colorado Springs bus depot. Louise didn't die because of a lack of faith. She hadn't given over to Satan. She didn't have the mark of the beast. Plus, she'd even been rebaptized when she joined the congregation, making that a non-issue. No, none of those had been a problem. Louise believed. Louise trusted. Louise stood on the promises, and yet she died. Even as the elders had gathered and placed a drop of blessed oil upon her forehead, she died not for lack of faith, but because of the ignorance of the congregation. People get skin cancer all the time, Zeb's mom had sobbed as they rode the bus that morning. You just go to the doctor and have it treated. Louise spotted it really early. She could have just had it frozen off. Zap! That's it. Instead, all the prayers in the world, all the faith in the world hadn't been able to save Louise, and she had died a slow, painful death. Funny, thought Zeb. Louise was the mother of Zeb's wife, Suzanne, the one he'd screwed and been forced to marry. In spite of all the pain Suzanne had experienced over her mother's death, however, she still hadn't wanted to take her own baby to a doctor. The elders and her father had prevailed, placing a drop of oil on the baby's forehead and then telling Suzanne and Zeb to pray to God the Father and God the Son. When the child failed to improve, the elders had asserted that it was their fault, Suzanne and Zeb's. They just didn't have enough faith. They just had to pray more, believe more. Well, bullshit. Who cared if Suzanne's own father was head of the congregation? There was no way in hell that bastard was God's apostle on earth. Hell no, he was Satan. Zeb's baby girl just had a chronic low-grade infection in her middle ear. That was why she was so cranky and crabby. You should have brought her in sooner because, from the looks of it, this has been going on for a while, said the doctor. Zeb had taken her to right after they'd fled the congregation. What that means is that we're going to be fairly aggressive, and one particular antibiotic. It's rather expensive, but we want this to clear up as soon as possible. Zeb had wanted to tell Suzanne about his plans to take Rivka to a doctor. He thought about asking her to run away with him, but he just couldn't tell what she'd think, say, or do. Supposedly they were married, but he really didn't know her. Not what she really wanted anyway. So rather than jeopardize the baby's safety and health, the elders would have locked Zeb up in the bakery basement if they'd found out he was planning to kidnap the baby. Zeb had kept his plans a secret, encouraged only by his mother in Santa Fe. He'd done the right thing, too. He'd known that when he was less than a mile away from the compound. He was positive as soon as he'd taken Rivka to the doctor. Maybe sometime soon he'd call Suzanne and apologize, but little Rivka was more important than anything, and he hugged her gently, kissed the top of her head. She was getting her medication. The infection was clearing up, and she was fine, just fine. Sleeping peacefully, eating well. What a relief. Yes, there was a God, or there probably was, but it certainly wasn't theirs. There was just one more problem after tonight. Where were they going to sleep? Okay, so now he couldn't go back to Janice's, and he doubted he could go back to that tiny rat hole of an apartment he'd rented. Brother Paul, that King Kong of a jerk, was in Minneapolis, and if there were other members of the congregation here, sooner or later, they'd find him, which meant Zeb realized that he was going to have to take off, leave Minneapolis completely. Maybe the storm would slow things down, give him a little extra time so he could at least collect his first paycheck from the hospital. Maybe Brenda might even know of a place where he could crash for a while. Sure, he hardly knew her, but she was nice. She probably would help. Just look at what she'd done for him tonight. Not only had she been the one to steal the medicine, she'd also suggested that Zeb and Rivka sleep in the laundry room so they wouldn't have to go back out in the winter storm. Someone knocked on the door, and Zeb immediately stiffened. 2 taps, a pause, 3 taps. Good, all was safe. It was her, Brenda, and he couldn't help but wonder why she'd come back so soon. Dinner? She'd said she was going to try to scrounge up something for him. Maybe she had, and maybe she'd even brought something for herself, and he would have some company. When the door opened, he looked up with a smile and said softly, Hi, I was just thinking about you. She quickly slipped in, pulled the door shut, locked it, and turned to him with a worried expression creasing her brow. Oh, God, he thought. He feared what was up. The congregation was just that conniving. Don't tell me. They're here already, he said. I don't know if it's them, those guys from that cult or whatever, but there are two guys upstairs looking for you, said Brenda, obviously concerned, even scared. They came up on the third floor and asked some of the nurses if we'd seen you tonight. Oh no, this is bad, really bad. Yeah, and they even had a picture they were showing around. They asked if I knew you, but I lied. One of the other nurses, though, well, she said she thought she'd seen you around earlier this evening. Shit! Zeb clenched his forehead with one hand. I can't stay here. I gotta go. I gotta get out of here. No, I think you'll be okay, countered Brenda. I just wanted to come down and tell you so you'd stay in here, so you wouldn't go out in the hall. No, you don't know them. They won't give up until they find me. They're like bloodhounds, and if they're this close, they're going to search the whole building. Zeb, what if Ripka wakes up and she starts crying? What if one of them is right out in the hall? Zeb started pushing himself out of the nest of laundry bags. I gotta get out of here right now. But, Brenda, they'll beat the shit out of me if they catch me, and they'll take her. Little Ripka. That's what they want. What they came for. They'll probably kill me, but they'll take her. What about the police? Maybe you should go to them. Yeah, right. Be arrested for kidnapping? But she's your daughter, pleaded Brenda, and she would have gotten sicker if you hadn't gotten her away from them. Trust me, I've thought of every angle. So where are you going to go? I don't know. I don't think I can go back to my apartment. If they're all the way out here at the hospital, then for sure they've already been there. I just don't get how they could have found me so quickly. Well, said Brenda, glancing around, there's always my place, I guess. That'd be okay. I'm here all night, but I don't think my roommate would mind. There's no way they could find you out here, out there. He looked up at her. Not if I get out of here without being seen. Relax, said Rollins, as the two of them rode the elevator down. It wasn't so hard finding him. What are you talking about? Countered Todd with a distinct frown. We haven't found him yet. Well, at least we know for sure that he works here. Don't worry, we'll find him tomorrow. First thing in the morning, we'll come out and talk to the personnel department. They'll have an address for him. What if it's a P.O. box or something? Then we'll just have to wait until he shows up for work. If he was here earlier tonight, then he works the late shift, and he'll probably be here tomorrow afternoon. You'll see. The elevator doors opened on the ground floor, and Todd stared out, unable to hide his frustration. Sure, they needed to find Zeb to tell him that the baby had been taken and see if he could help locate the child, but most of all, Todd wanted to see Zeb, meet him face to face, look into his eyes. They headed to the left, down the long, quiet hall, and toward the front doors. Realizing how sore he was from the scuffle at Janice's, Todd felt himself moving slower and slower. You look exhausted, said Rollins, placing a reassuring hand on Todd's shoulder. Let's get you home so you can rest. Todd nodded and managed to smile, for this was what he liked about Rollins. Not simply his ability to read Todd, but the ease with which he offered comfort. Comfort that Todd not only found easy to accept, but for the first time in his life, easy to return. Thanks, but I can't go home, said Todd. We should head back to Janice's. I'm sure she's a wreck. So let's spend the night there. She's got plenty of room. Okay. They proceeded down the hall in silence, passing a closed gift shop, another hallway, the lone receptionist sitting behind the counter. Further down, they came to the hospital guard, a lanky older man who had just returned and was now seated at his small desk. Good night, gentlemen, he said, looking up from a fishing magazine. Now drive safely. It's pretty nasty out there. Good night, replied Todd. They paused before the revolving door, zipped up their jackets, slipped on their gloves. Ready? Asked Todd. Yeah, ready to go to Florida, griped Rollins. Todd went first, and as soon as the automatic door slid open and he'd exited the building, he was slapped by stinging snow. He looked up at a tall street light and saw not only how heavily the snow was still falling, but the nearly horizontal angle at which it was blowing. Great, the wind had picked up, and the conditions worsened to near blizzard, clenching his jacket collar around his neck and squinting his eyes. Todd thought this was unbelievable. Things were going from bad to worse. Stepping into snow well above his boot, Todd led the way, trudging quickly through the deep white stuff and toward the parking lot. "Hey!" called a voice through the wind. "Hey, you too!" They paused, looked back, and saw the tall guard poking his head out and waving at them. "Hey!" he called again. "Come back here!" "Maybe this is our lucky break," said Todd to Rollins. They turned around, running through the snow, their heads bowed. Rushing inside, Todd and Rollins found the guard gesturing with his hands, unable to hide his excitement. "That kid you were looking for! He's here now, right now! One of the nurses just called the front desk, and she said she just saw him." "Where?" demanded Todd. "Right here on the ground floor, straight back this way." The guard turned quickly and said, "Come on!" The woman at the front desk leaned over the counter and added, "The nurse said he's got a baby." "What?" snapped Todd. "A baby," she said. "He's got one all wrapped up." "Is that his? Does he have a baby?" "Dear Lord, he didn't take one from the maternity ward, did he? That's all we need, trouble like that." "Oh, shit," Todd muttered as he glanced at Rollins. Both Todd and Rollins hurried after the guard, rushing past the elevator, and turned right at the next corridor, which was long and dimly lit. The guard then turned left, hurried up a ramp, through some large, swinging double doors, and into another part of the building. "She saw him back here in the annex," he said. He led them past the x-ray department, past a lab, through another set of doors, and back toward the commissary. Rounding a corner, they came upon a nurse, a woman with short brown hair, and one of the people that Todd and Rollins had shown the picture to upstairs. "One of my patients was hungry, so I came down to get something for her to eat, and there he was, the kid you showed me in the picture, the one who works here. I mean, I'd seen him earlier tonight, but just now he was coming out of the room with a baby. He saw me. I tried to say something, but then he got real scared and took off." "When?" demanded Todd. "Just a couple of minutes ago." "Where'd he go?" asked Rollins. Pointing down the hall to a door, she said, "He went out the back." Todd and Rollins took off racing down the hall, hurling the door open and bursting outside. Once again, Todd quickly looked from side to side, took note of a parked truck with a thick layer of snow covering its windshield and hood. Straight ahead, on the edge of a small parking area, sat a brown dumpster, and there, leading off to the right and through a line of drifting snow, was a set of tracks. "This way!" shouted Todd, bracing themselves against the weather. They followed the prints around the corner of the brick building. From there, the broken trail of snow led across an open area and past the parking ramp itself. Their heads bowed against the wind, they finally reached a well-lit parking lot. At most, there were 20 or 30 cars parked about and buried in the blowing snow, yet there was no immediate sign of Zeb or anyone else. "Either he was parked out here in the employee lot," speculated Rollins as he surveyed the area, "or someone was out here waiting for him. In which case," Todd realized, "Zeb could already be gone." Shielding his eyes, Todd glanced around, unable to make any sense of this. "I don't get it," said Todd, totally perplexed. "If he's got a kid, whose is it? I mean, it couldn't be his own, could it? Rivka was taken from Janice's not even 2 hours ago, and I was there. I fought with the guy who took her. Zeb was nowhere around. He couldn't have her, could he? If Zeb nabbed a kid from the maternity ward or something like that, however, then this is going to get really complicated." Rollins was focused on the tracks, and as they reached the first row of cars, the prince plunged through a pile of snow, then disappeared in a barren, windswept area. Right behind him, Todd searched to the left, then to the right. Some 15 feet away, he saw the tracks pass again between two parked cars. "Over here!" Even as he spoke, he saw the taillights of a small car, one parked on the far side of the lot, suddenly burned red. In an instant, both Todd and Rollins were running through the snow. It had to be Zeb, just as quickly, though. It seemed that Zeb saw them, for the car's tires started desperately spinning in the snow. "Just let him be stuck," prayed Todd, who felt as if he were running through deep sand. But why would Zeb be trying to get away? What had he done? Even though Zeb had obviously floored the gas, the vehicle barely moved and the tires screamed a high pitch. Then the little beat-up car started fishtailing, swinging from side to side. As fast as he could, Todd tore through the snow. but neither he nor Rollins was fast enough, for the vehicle was gaining speed and circling around. "He's headed for the gate!" shouted Rollins. There was only one way out, an exit that was blocked by a wooden gate, swung down into position, and Todd and Rollins swerved around, tried to cut Zeb off. By then, however, the little car was going even faster, and in a desperate moment, it went shooting past Todd. Right at that instant, Todd's eyes locked on those of the terrified driver, a young man behind a frosty glass window, who might or might not be Todd's son. Todd hung on to the image of those dark eyes, then slowed to a stop. When he realized it was useless, his breath huffing out of his body, in great clouds, he watched as the small car went swerving across the snowy parking lot, then smashed right through the wooden entry gate, blasting it to bits, and disappeared into the blizzardly night. A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold: to offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides, and in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.